The Homeland Security Task Force model will provide coordinated coverage across the nation with a task force in every state.
$19 billion. That is not a typo. That is not political exaggeration. That is the verified amount that federal investigators now believe was systematically drained from American taxpayers through the most sophisticated fraud and cartel infiltration operation ever discovered on United States soil. Minneapolis, Minnesota, a city known for its lakes, its progressive values, and its vibrant immigrant communities. But beneath that surface, something had been growing, something dark, something organized. Something that had roots stretching from the frozen streets of the Cedar Riverside district all the way to the sun-scorched strongholds of the Sinaloa Cartel in Mexico. And at the center of it all stood one name: State Senator Amira Osman, Somali-born, community hero, political trailblazer. And according to a 347-page federal indictment, the architect of a criminal empire that turned humanitarian aid into cartel financing, refugee assistance into human trafficking, and the trust of an entire community into ashes. What you are about to hear is not comfortable, it is not simple, and it does not fit neatly into any political narrative. But it is a story that needs to be told, because what happened in Minneapolis was not just fraud, it was infiltration at the highest levels. And the next part is worse than you can imagine. 4:17 in the morning, Minneapolis. The temperature had plunged to 31 degrees below zero. The kind of cold that burns your lungs when you breathe. The kind of cold that keeps everyone indoors, keeps the streets silent, keeps the city sleeping. But not everyone was sleeping. In the Cedar Riverside district, a neighborhood the locals had nicknamed Little Mogadishu, 58 federal agents were moving through the darkness. FBI, ICE, HHS Office of Inspector General, DEA. They came from 4 different agencies, but tonight they moved as one coordinated strike force. No sirens, no lights, just the crunch of tactical boots on frozen asphalt. The first target was a community center on the 7th floor of a high-rise that had been billing Medicaid for over 12,000 mental health visits per month. On paper, it was a beacon of hope for traumatized refugees. In reality, federal investigators suspected it was a ghost operation. A shell, a front. The stack formed up at the door. One heavy swing of the battering ram and they were through. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Agents swept room by room, calling clear as they moved. What they found was not a bustling clinic serving thousands. It was a dusty room with 4 folding chairs and a card table. No doctors, no nurses, no patients, just server racks humming in a back closet, churning out thousands of fraudulent claims every single night while Minneapolis slept. But that was just the first location. Simultaneously, 3 other teams hit 3 other targets across the city. A halal grocery store that had been flagged for suspicious wire transfers. A supposed job training center that had billed the state for services it never provided. And a warehouse in Burnsville that was registered as a food distribution hub for refugee families. That warehouse. That is where everything changed. When DEA agents breached the loading dock doors at 4:32 in the morning, the chemical smell hit them immediately. Sharp, acrid, unmistakable. This was not a food distribution center. This was a narcotics processing facility. Hidden inside 50-pound sacks of basmati rice labeled for humanitarian relief, agents discovered vacuum-sealed bricks of fentanyl. Hundreds of them. Some bore the scorpion stamp of the Sinaloa Cartel. Others were marked with codes that forensic analysts would later trace to manufacturing labs in Culiacan. The seizure numbers were staggering. In that single warehouse, federal agents recovered 2.1 million fentanyl pills, 47 kilos of heroin, and 31 kilos of methamphetamine. Street value, approximately $94 million. But the drugs were not the most disturbing discovery. In a fortified basement accessed through a hidden door behind storage racks, agents found 43 Somali nationals. Men and women, some barely out of their teens. They were not employees, they were captives. These individuals had been trafficked into the United States under the pretense of refugee resettlement. Their sponsorship paperwork had been filed by nonprofits connected to Senator Osman's network. The moment they landed on American soil, their passports were confiscated. They were told they owed $50,000 for their travel costs. To work off that debt, they were forced onto drug packaging lines, handling toxic chemicals without protective equipment, working 18-hour shifts in conditions that violated every labor law on the books. And if they refused, if they tried to contact authorities, if they attempted to escape, they were told their families back in Somalia would be killed. One agent, a 20-year DEA veteran, later said it was the worst thing he had ever seen. Not the drugs, the people, the fear in their eyes, the realization that they had traded one nightmare for another. 10:47 in the morning, FBI Cyber Forensics Division, Minneapolis Field Office. While tactical teams were still processing the raid sites, a different kind of operation was underway in a secure room 3 floors below street level. Analysts hunched over screens. Coffee cups piled up. The air thick with tension and the low hum of processing servers. The hard drives and devices seized during the raids were being cracked open one by one. And what emerged was a network diagram so vast, so intricate, so deliberately hidden that it took 3 separate visualization programs just to map it all. The operation had a code name buried in encrypted files. Project Horizon. Here is how it worked. The first layer was fraud. Massive, industrial-scale fraud. Senator Osman's network had acquired the stolen identities of approximately 80,000 immigrants through dark web purchases. Using those identities, they created phantom patients, ghost clients, people who existed on paper but had never set foot in a clinic, never received a meal from a food bank, never attended a job training session. Every night, automated scripts running on those server racks in the community center would blast thousands of fraudulent claims into Minnesota's Medicaid and welfare systems. Therapy sessions that never happened. Housing assistance for apartments that did not exist. Childcare subsidies for children who were fabricated. The numbers were almost incomprehensible. Federal investigators estimated that in a 3-year period, the network had submitted over 4 million fraudulent claims. The total amount siphoned from state and federal programs, $18.7 billion. But the fraud was just the engine. The fuel was something far more dangerous. The second layer was money laundering. The stolen funds did not stay in Minnesota. They moved fast through a maze of shell companies and ghost corporations registered in Delaware, Nevada, Dubai, Nairobi, and Djibouti. Through fake consulting contracts and phantom real estate transactions. Through cryptocurrency exchanges that specialized in obscuring the origins of dirty money. Forensic accountants traced the flow. Medicaid payments would hit a non-profit account in Minneapolis. Within hours, those funds would be transferred to a holding company in Dubai. From Dubai, they would move to accounts in Mexico City. And from Mexico City, they would be used to purchase narcotics from the Sinaloa Cartel. The cartel would then ship the drugs back to Minnesota, hidden in humanitarian aid shipments, mixed in with legitimate goods destined for refugee assistance programs. The drugs would be distributed, sold, and the profits would cycle back through the same laundering network. It was a closed loop, self-sustaining, almost elegant in its horrific efficiency. And at the top of it all, signing off on every major transaction, authorizing every significant money movement, was a single digital signature. State Senator Amira Osman. One analyst stared at the network diagram and said something that stuck with everyone in that room. This is not corruption. This is command-level collusion. She did not exploit the system. She redesigned it. 6 o'clock in the morning, February 4th. Federal Joint Task Force Command Center, Minneapolis. The raids the night before had been just the beginning. Phase 1. The surgical strikes. Now it was time for Phase 2. The full-scale offensive. In a converted warehouse that served as the temporary command center, a giant digital map covered an entire wall. Across that map, 73 red markers pulsed. Each marker represented a target, a location connected to Senator Osman's network, a node in the web that needed to be eliminated. The operation was called Veil Lift, and it was about to become the largest coordinated federal law enforcement action in Minnesota history. At 6:14 in the morning, the order was given. Over 800 federal agents began moving simultaneously across the Twin Cities metro area and beyond. FBI tactical teams, DEA special response units, ICE enforcement squads, HHS investigators, IRS criminal division agents. They were supported by 47 local SWAT teams, 12 armored vehicles, and 6 Black Hawk helicopters providing aerial surveillance and rapid response capability. The targets were everywhere. A mansion in the wealthy suburb of Wayzata. On paper, it was owned by a holding company that provided consulting services to refugee resettlement agencies. In reality, it was the operational headquarters for the money laundering arm of the network. Agents breached the front door at 6:17 and found 3 accountants frantically trying to destroy hard drives. They were too slow. A strip mall in Brooklyn Park. 4 storefronts, all owned by the same shell company. A tax preparation service. A wire transfer business. A travel agency. And a cell phone store. Each one was a node in the network. Each one had been used to move money, recruit participants, and coordinate logistics. The agents who raided those locations seized over $2 million in cash and enough financial records to keep forensic accountants busy for months. A trucking company in Shakopee. According to its registration, it specialized in transporting agricultural products across the Midwest. According to federal investigators, it was the primary logistics arm for moving narcotics from the Mexican border to distribution points throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. The company's 37 trucks had been modified with hidden compartments. When agents searched the fleet, they discovered an additional 12 kilos of fentanyl and $800,000 in vacuum-sealed cash. A network of residential properties scattered across South Minneapolis. These homes had been purchased through front organizations and converted into processing centers. Drugs would arrive, be repackaged for street distribution, and then move out to dealers across the region. Some of these homes had also been used to house trafficking victims before they were moved to work sites. By noon, the scope of the operation was becoming clear. Agents had hit all 73 targets. They had arrested 147 individuals. They had seized over $300 million in cash, property, and financial instruments. They had recovered enough narcotics to supply the entire Midwest for months. But perhaps most importantly, they had captured the evidence needed to prove just how deep the corruption went. Here is the part that is hardest to hear. The part that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the systems designed to protect us. Senator Osmond did not build this empire alone. She could not have. An operation of this scale required protection. It required inside knowledge. It required people on the payroll who could make problems disappear before they became investigations. The seized servers contained records of payments, bribes, consulting fees, donations to political campaigns, contributions to charitable foundations, all of it designed to buy silence, cooperation, and protection. 19 Minnesota law enforcement officers were identified as having received payments from the network. Some were patrol officers who had been paid to look the other way when drug shipments moved through their districts. Others were supervisors who had been paid to bury complaints and redirect investigations. 2 were senior sergeants who had access to raid schedules and warrant applications. They had been feeding information to the network for years. 7 state government employees were identified as participants. Auditors who had been paid to approve fraudulent claims without verification. Program administrators who had been paid to fast-track applications from shell organizations. A mid-level official in the Department of Human Services who had been paid to suppress whistleblower complaints. And 3 judges. 3 sitting judges who had been identified as having received substantial payments through intermediaries. Their courtrooms had been used to delay investigations, dismiss charges against network participants, and grant favorable rulings on civil matters connected to the organization. One FBI agent who had been working the case for 2 years said that when they started pulling on these threads, they realized the corruption was not a few bad actors. It was a parallel system, a shadow infrastructure that existed alongside the legitimate government, protecting the network, enabling its growth, making it nearly untouchable. For honest officers, honest civil servants, honest judges who had spent their careers believing in the system, the revelations were devastating. One Minneapolis police officer, speaking anonymously, said it felt like learning your own family had been betraying you. Every raid you planned, every investigation you worked, someone was watching, someone was reporting back. The arrests of the compromised officials were conducted with the same precision as the cartel raids. Before dawn on February 5th, federal agents arrived at 19 homes across the Twin Cities metro area. The officers and officials who had been on the network's payroll were taken into custody. Some went quietly, others protested their innocence. One deputy chief tried to flee through his backyard and was tackled by agents in the snow. The badge had been tarnished. The system had been corrupted. Now the hard work of rebuilding would begin. By the end of the first week, the full scope of Senator Osmond's network was becoming clear, and it was far larger than Minneapolis. The trucking routes did not stop at the Minnesota border. They extended into Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Distribution networks had been established in Milwaukee, Des Moines, Fargo, and Sioux Falls. Each location had its own hierarchy of local operators, each one connected back to the central command structure in Minneapolis. The financial flows extended even further. Investigators traced money movements to accounts in 13 countries across 3 continents. The laundering network had been designed by professionals, people who understood exactly how to move billions without triggering the automated alerts that banks and regulators relied upon. And the human trafficking operation, the exploitation of vulnerable migrants, that had been going on for nearly 5 years. Investigators identified over 1,800 individuals who had been brought into the United States through the network's sponsorship programs and then forced into labor. Some worked the drug processing lines. Others were placed in legitimate-seeming jobs at businesses owned by network affiliates, their wages garnished to pay off phantom debts they never owed. The Sinaloa cartel connection was confirmed through encrypted communications recovered from seized devices. Senator Osmond had been in regular contact with cartel logistics coordinators in Mexico. She had used her position, her nonprofit network, and her political influence to create a secure pipeline for narcotics entering the United States through the northern Midwest. Why Minnesota? Because no one was looking. Because the humanitarian narrative provided perfect cover. Because challenging the operation meant risking accusations of bias against vulnerable immigrant communities. because the system had been engineered to protect itself. One document recovered from Senator Osman's home office outlined a 5-year strategic plan. The goal: to make Minnesota the permanent northern hub for Sinaloa cartel operations in the United States, to expand the laundering network, to increase drug distribution capacity, to place more sympathetic officials in positions of power throughout state government. The document was titled Horizon 2030. It was a blueprint for turning an entire state into cartel territory. 7:14 in the morning, February 5th. Senator Amira Osman's residence, Lake Minnetonka. The house sat on 2 acres of lakefront property. It had been purchased 3 years earlier through a non-profit organization that was supposed to be developing affordable housing for refugee families. The purchase price, $2.4 million. When federal agents arrived, Senator Osman was in her bedroom, frantically packing a travel bag. Her private security detail had already fled. Her phones were ringing unanswered. The network she had built was collapsing around her. She was arrested at 7:17 in the morning and escorted out of the house in handcuffs. Gone were the designer suits she wore on the Senate floor. Gone was the confident demeanor of a rising political star. She walked through a gauntlet of federal agents, her face pale, her voice silent. The charges: 47 felony counts, racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, human trafficking, harboring illegal aliens for commercial advantage, bribery of public officials, and 23 additional counts related to the specific frauds perpetrated against federal benefit programs. If convicted on all counts, she faced multiple life sentences. As she was placed in the back of an unmarked federal vehicle, camera drones from local news stations captured the moment. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the footage was everywhere. The political trailblazer, the refugee success story, the symbol of hope, all of it shattered. In the weeks that followed, the investigations continued. More arrests were made. More evidence was gathered. More victims were identified and given assistance. Federal authorities announced a comprehensive overhaul of Minnesota's welfare and benefit systems. New verification requirements, artificial intelligence-driven fraud detection, mandatory in-person visits for certain categories of claims. Pilot programs showed a 72% reduction in suspicious applications within the first month. $312 million in assets connected to the network were seized and frozen. A lengthy legal process to recover the full $18.7 billion would take years, but the first steps had been taken. The Somali community in Minneapolis found itself grappling with a painful contradiction. The vast majority of Somali Americans in the Twin Cities had nothing to do with the fraud. They were honest people who had fled violence and tyranny, who had worked hard to build new lives, who had contributed to their communities and their adopted country. But Senator Osman had used their identity, their story, their vulnerability as a shield for her crimes. Community leaders spoke of betrayal. Mosques held meetings to discuss how to rebuild trust. Ordinary families worried about the stigma that would attach to their children. The genuine refugees, the honest immigrants, the law-abiding residents of Little Mogadishu were perhaps the greatest victims of all. Their narrative had been stolen and twisted into cover for a criminal empire. Now they would have to fight to reclaim it. Here is what you need to understand. What happened in Minneapolis was not an isolated incident. It was not a fluke. It was not the work of one uniquely corrupt individual. It was a template, a model, a proof of concept. The tools that Senator Osman used, the automated fraud systems, the shell company networks, the cryptocurrency laundering techniques, the exploitation of humanitarian programs, all of that still exists. The blueprints are still circulating. The dark web forums where stolen identities are sold are still operating. The cartels are still looking for new partners, new pipelines, new opportunities. Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it works quietly, through paperwork, through systems, through the exploitation of trust and good intentions. Sometimes the most dangerous criminals are not the ones holding guns. They are the ones holding gavels and signing legislation. The $19 billion stolen in Minnesota did not disappear into thin air. It bought something: drugs that killed people, trafficking operations that destroyed lives, corruption that weakened institutions, and influence that extended far beyond a single state. Every fentanyl overdose in the Midwest became a little more likely because of what happened in Minneapolis. Every family torn apart by addiction. Every community ravaged by the drug trade. The money that made it possible came from American taxpayers, stolen through systems that were supposed to help the vulnerable, and funneled to cartels that view human life as inventory. That is the cost. That is what $18.7 billion actually bought. Senator Amira Osman is currently awaiting trial in a federal detention facility. Her attorneys have entered a not guilty plea. The legal proceedings are expected to take years. The officers, officials, and judges arrested in connection with the network are facing their own prosecutions. Some have begun cooperating with investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. The information they provide may lead to additional arrests. The Sinaloa Cartel has not been significantly disrupted by the Minnesota operation. They are an organization with resources measured in tens of billions of dollars and reach extending across the Western Hemisphere. The loss of one northern distribution hub is an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. They will adapt. They will find new partners. They will rebuild. But in Minneapolis, something has changed. The people who were supposed to be watching are now actually watching. The systems that were designed to catch fraud are now actually catching fraud. The communities that were exploited are now demanding accountability. It is not enough. It is never enough. But it is a start. If you are still watching, if this story matters to you, if you believe that corruption should be exposed regardless of who is responsible, then let others know. Share this story. Talk about it. Ask questions about the systems in your own state. Because if it can happen in Minnesota, it can happen anywhere. And if it is happening somewhere else, do you really believe no one knows? Or do you believe that someone somewhere has decided that silence is more convenient than truth? Power feeds on silence. It grows in the dark. The only disinfectant is light. This story was a fictional dramatization. The names of public officials were invented. The events were inspired by real concerns about fraud and cartel infiltration, but do not represent any specific real investigation or prosecution. But the questions it raises are real. The vulnerabilities it describes are real. And the need for vigilance, transparency, and accountability is absolutely real. Stay watching, stay asking, and never forget that in a democracy, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. The next story we investigate might be closer to home than you think.